Hi, sports fans. I'm Michael Battista, reporting for Lions Television. I'm here with Stephen A. Smith, who's hosting TCNJ Spring Lecture, accomplished radio host of ESPN's First Take. So thank you so much for sitting down with me.
My pleasure.
So I have to ask, as someone who's made a career out of, talking about sports and saying your opinion on sports and like reporting on it, what is something you think you see people do that just doesn't work? Everyone has an opinion about sports. Everyone can talk about Odell Beckham Jr. or LeBron James, but what is something people need to do if they want to hold a conversation with it, like on radio or on TV?
Know what you're talking about.
Know what you're talking about.
It's really what that comes down to. I mean, you can't, if you don't have content, how do you have something to talk about? How do you have any credibility? How can you be in a position to engage with folks and to get them to listen to what you have to say? You have to remember that people who listen to radio or watch a show on television, what they're watching or what they're listening to is what ultimately provokes them to want to engage in dialogue with you, or to listen to the dialogue that you're engaging with someone else, or even when they're talking to themselves because they're doing a solo show like myself. If you don't have any kind of content whatsoever, then you're not doing anything that garners any interest. And if you don't have any interest and you're not compelling to the consumer out there, then the consumer is not going to exist, which means you'll be talking to yourself all by yourself and you'll be pretty much irrelevant. But you got to make sure that you have content, because when you don't have content, you don't have anything provocative or interesting to engage the listener, the viewer, the reader, and you're not going to survive very long in this business.
And that's what keeps them either calling into the radio show or continuing to read your sports columns, stuff like that.
Well, you got to remember, everyone knows my background. They may not pay as much attention to it as they used to, but you can't ignore the fact that I've been doing this for 25 years, that I wrote for the New York Daily News and then the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I was everything from a high school writer to a college writer to a pro writer to an NBA columnist to a general sports columnist. And so when you have that kind of background and you have the kind of connections that I've been able to have and been blessed to have over the years, where you've seen me interview people or quote everybody under the sun, then you know that there's a foundation that I'm bringing to talk radio. There's a foundation that I'm bringing to television that most people may not have, because usually you have somebody doing one or the other. Newspaper writers are stuck doing newspapers, and you might see them interviewed on radio, or you might see them interviewed on television, and then somebody that's trained in television, knowing how to read a prompter and knowing how to traffic information and what have you from one segment to another. And then you have talk radio folks who are highly opinionated and can talk ad nauseum. But it's very, very few people in this business that have been able to do all three. I'm one of them.
Going on that, 2 decades of work, working Daily News, like you said, Philadelphia Inquirer, then going to ESPN and CNN SI for a little bit. And I'm wondering that we've seen Prince decline, we've seen TV somewhat slump, and we've seen things like podcasts, like PTI podcast or online, just explode. And I'm wondering, we're having such a shift very quickly. Where do you see maybe sports media or media in general going maybe in the next 5 years?
Oh, it's the digital age. There's no question about that, because people are using it. They're watching news on their smartphones. People like you and others can speak to that better than I can, because the reality is that I grew up reading newspapers, and I'm from the television generation, and talk radio, the advent of it came about in the mid 80s or what have you, where Mike and the Mad Dog took it by storm and just they really spearheaded and pioneered the movement of sports talk radio. And then everybody took it from there. From a news side, you had the Rush Limbaughs of the world that were incredibly popular on an audio stage. But what has happened is that now, whether you're reading or listening or watching videos, it's usually on smartphones. It's usually on tablets, whether it's the iPad or the tablet, whether it's your smartphone, the iPhone, or whatever the case may be. This is where people are going, not just to get their news, but to get their entertainment. The other day, I'm on a plane ride home from LA, and a guy is watching. I'm on Delta Airlines, and there's TVs behind every seat. And this guy is watching a movie on his cell phone. That's what he's doing. A person across from me is reading the Wall Street Journal on their iPad. I'm watching a movie on my iPad. And so that's how people are acquiring their information and their entertainment. It's the digital age, and the things that you do need to be able to matriculate to that digital age. You can't be something that's saying, that, oh, it's not for me. I want a newspaper, or I want to actually watch the television, or what have you. That's not going to work, because again, your relevancy is contingent upon the support you receive from the people who patronize your product. And if the younger generation are your primary consumers and they're watching smartphones, then you better make sure that things you do are applicable to that. Otherwise, you're going to be extinct before long.
All right. And speaking of that digital age and everyone being connected, in an interview earlier this year with Sporting News, you talked a little bit about how sports personalities have been going into politics on their own social media and stuff like that, and how they should stay in their lane. And I'm wondering do you wonder about future generations of media personalities in general sort of feeling that maybe they can speak their minds separate from their brand or separate from their business, and have it be a totally different thing and have it not affect them?
Well, I want to clarify that, because a lot of people assume that's what I said. That's not exactly what I said. I wasn't telling people to stay in their lane in terms of don't ever do anything other than what you're assigned to do. That's not what I meant. If you're a sports person, I'm not telling you not to talk about politics at all. Obviously, sometimes sports and politics is intertwined.
Yeah.
We have a president in the United States of America that's either galvanizing in some respects or polarizing in others. Well, I'm the person that interviewed him before he became president. I was on the phone with Donald Trump in 2014 when he wanted to own the Buffalo Bills. I was on the phone with him when he said, excuse me, if these damn NFL owners don't give me a piece of the pie, if they don't let me in this good old boys club and allow me to become an owner in the NFL, I'm going to run for the president of the United States of America. Now, obviously, nobody was thinking about that, but that's exactly what he said to me in a private phone conversation. And so, lo and behold, years later, he becomes the president. But all of a sudden, this whole national anthem issue percolates with Colin Kaepernick, which is something that I'll allude to tonight on stage. And everybody's talking about, well, you know what, the president and the flag and all of this other stuff. No, he was ticked off because these same NFL owners didn't let him in, and he didn't forget, and I remembered that he didn't forget because he told me he wasn't going to forget if it did not happen. Well, that's politics intertwining with sports. How do you ignore that? You don't ignore that. What you do is you pay attention to it. You see how it's relevant to your genre. And that's how you address it. And that's the kind of message that I was trying to send. I was saying that when people tune in to ESPN or any sports network, they're expecting to hear something relative to sports. To sit up there and completely deviate from that just because you want to vent, I don't think is the way to go. But if you can find a way to intertwine it with sports, well, then you're fulfilling your obligation to your consumer while at the same time fulfilling your own needs to express yourself on a particular issue that might transcend the world of sports. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about completely forgetting it. I'm talking about making sure that you know what your lane is in terms of who your consumer is, who pays your bills, who you're targeting, who you're paid to feed. If you do those things and then you venture or extend beyond those barriers, it's okay so long as you don't forget them along the way, because you're asking for them to patronize you. You're asking for them to patronize your brand. You don't just forget about all of that because you want to say what you want to say. What you do is you take them into consideration, so when you do open your mouth, it's something relevant to what they expected from you and what they're paying for. And that way you're making sure you're feeding them as well as yourself. But you feed them first. You don't feed yourself first because you don't pay yourself. Somebody else is paying you.
And do you think younger media people are going to be learning that? And do you think that they're learning that very well?
I think they need to. I think they need to. And the reason why they need to is because whether you're an entrepreneur or you're an employee, ultimately, I don't care who you are, you need somebody to help you along the way. You can own your own business. How successful are you if no one patronizes your product? How successful are you if nobody supports what you're doing? Even if you own your own business, you still answer to somebody. And in your case, it may be a consumer, but you're answering to somebody. So when you realize that, you realize that you're always working for somebody. You got to know the game. And in order to go get it and to make things happen for yourself, you got to know what the game is. You got to know what the rules are. And you have to express a willingness to play it. Because to do anything, to deviate from all three of those things, you're basically saying, I don't need anybody. And if you're telling a consumer, I don't need you, the consumer is going to say, fine, I'll take my money and I'll spend it elsewhere. And then you won't have a business. And that's just senseless.
All right, well, thank you so much. That's really insightful, and I'm really glad that you were just so upfront with that. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Lions Television. I'm Michael Battista, and I'll see you later.
All right, let's bring in the next.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All right.
My name's Connor Smith, and I'm here with The Signal, our student newspaper. We have Stephen A. Smith here with us today. So just starting out, I was wondering if I could ask you about something you said with your interview with LTV about how it's very important to be someone that knows what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
To young adults, especially people interested in breaking into the field, what advice would you give to lay the groundwork and, especially in a digital age, climb your way up the ladder?
Read everything.
Mhm.
Read everything. Watch as much as you can. Pay attention to what the aspiring audience that you are targeting wants to know, and make sure you know about it, as much about it as you possibly can. If you are going to be a writer for the student newspaper or a host of a campus radio talk show, you should be walking around this campus. You should be feeling the pulse of the people, getting an idea of the kind of things that percolate in their minds and their soul, the kind of things that they want to know about, the kind of things that they're talking about. And you should use that as a tool to gain knowledge about what they want. And then when it's your time to speak, write, or whatever the case may be, you give it to them. It's just that simple. It's about the consumer. It's never about you. It's always about them. And when you understand that, that's the first ingredient to winning. Knowing that it's not about you. It might be about your abilities, but ultimately it's about you and your willingness to give them what they want, because you understand that your success is defined by others. It's not defined by you. In the world that we live in a capitalistic society, when you're talking about the business of being successful, resonating, making money, you can't do that if nobody supports you. And nobody's going to support you if you show a penchant to not give a damn about what they want and what they care about, and all you care about is yourself. Mm-hmm. You have to pay attention to that, and that has to be your approach.
Mm-hmm. How do you think your career path might have changed if you were coming up in the current landscape we have, where digital media is kind of forcing print media by the wayside?
Well, for me, it would make no difference. That's my mentality. My mentality is that my gifts are my gifts, and one of the gifts that I believe that I have is a genuine sincerity about caring about what the audience wants. And so I would pay attention to it. And then the question is, do you have the personality to stand out? I have just been an individual who's always believed, whether you love me or hate me, there's only one me. You can name a bunch of people and put their name as Stephen A. Smith. I'm going to stand out. I'm not going to be somebody that's just run of the mill. I'm not going to be somebody that I'm just one of many. There's something about me that you're going to know stands out, and I've always been that way. And for me personally, what's helped me along the way was my candor. I have always been an individual who cared about the truth, while at the same time cared about being fair. But in the same breath, I'm not a liar. Mm-hmm. And so if I go to a game, for example, and you shoot 2 for 20 and you play like garbage, I'm not the kind of person that's going to say, you really struggled a little bit tonight. I'm going to say you played like garbage, or something pretty close to it, to accentuate and punctuate my point, because I want my audience to know I get what you saw. I'm not foolish, and I'm not going to soft pedal it. Now, if it's something personal and private, that's different. But if it's something that you do in a public forum where thousands, if not millions of people are watching, why am I lying? Why am I going to have somebody look at me and say, come on, Stephen A., give it to us straight. You know what you saw. Why would I do that? I'm not doing that. I'm going to give it to you just like it was. Whatever you saw is what you're going to get. That's been my approach throughout my life. And it's worked for me. I mean, if I wasn't doing this, I was going to be a criminal lawyer. So my attitude is that, you know, it's the same principle. I mean, when I joked around per se, and I said, if I was Johnny Cochran, if I was going up against Johnny Cochran with the OJ trial, I would have beat him. I don't mean I would have beat him, me some novice, but I mean if I were a lawyer with the same level of education and intellect as the late, great Johnny Cochran, God rest his soul, there is no way in hell he would have beat me with the OJ trial. I mean it. There's no way that you could have told me that I couldn't convince 12 jurors with that evidence to put his behind under the jail. Christopher Darden and Marsha Clark. No, I would not have been them. I'd have won that case. Because my attitude is, with that evidence and that level of skill that I just referred to Johnny Cochran having, nothing would stop me. Because it would come down to my ability to convince 12 jurors to believe me more than to believe you. And I don't believe that I would ever lose a case in that situation. That's how I always have been, and I've never changed.
What do you think the world would be like if there were more Stephen A's and less Marsha Clarks?
Well, I don't want to say less Marsha Clarks as if she's some bad person or incompetent or whatever. A matter of fact, when you watch some of these articles about OJ or you see some of these movies about OJ, it was more Christopher Darden wanting him to put on a glove that lost the case than anything else.
Right.
So I don't know how much Marsha Clark is to blame for that. But I will say this. The world filled with Stephen A's, for those with alligator skin, it would be fine. For those, the faint of heart, that have a tough time dealing with the truth, it would be nightmarish, because you're going to get something close to the truth. Again, being in constant pursuit of the truth doesn't mean you always acquire it. Some things you're not able to obtain. But I'm the kind of person that I focus on being in pursuit of the truth and being honest about what I don't know. If you watch me on TV, you listen to me on radio, I'm never hesitant to acknowledge what I don't know. I'll say, I don't know this. I'm not sure. This is how it looks. You know, all of those caveats, all of those prefaces come into play because you want to let the audience know how fair-minded you are. You don't want to pretend to know what you don't know. And because it's dishonest, it's disingenuous, and it's the kind of thing that can ultimately alienate an audience, and it should. Because why should an audience want to listen to somebody just run their mouth and talk about things they simply don't know? But if you have an idea, you can speak on it, particularly when you're willing to acknowledge the limitations of your knowledge. You can do that. And that's something that I make sure I do all the time.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is 91.3 FM, WTSR, college radio station at the College of New Jersey. My name is Brian Moreno. I'm here with Stephen A. Smith.
Yes, sir.
So what are some changes in the world of sports that you've noticed over your very long career of being a sports analyst?
Well, the advent of social media has changed a lot of things because in certain respects it's emboldened some members of the sports world. It's heightened their level of sensitivity. And perhaps most disturbing, it's distracted them to some degree because folks are just as, if not more, focused on their brand than they are on actual success on a court or field of play. It's not to say that they don't go out there and work their tails off, that they're not trying to be great and they're not trying to be successful, but because they've witnessed and realized there's a different avenue towards monetary success, they focus on that just as much. You see guys with commercials that have never played in a championship, let alone won one. But unfortunately, because times have changed drastically and the individual is marketed to such a degree, I don't have a problem with an individual being marketed. I have a problem with folks being treated like winners that have never won anything. And when you see people with an abundance of endorsement deals, commercials, knowing that they've been able to supplement their income and elevate their quality of life exponentially because they're marketable, I don't blame them for taking it, because I would too. But it does make me ask the audience, what exactly did these people do to generate your interest in them in such a way that you have absolutely no problem with them reaping the monetary benefits that they reaped when they haven't won anything?
Yeah.
You know, my attitude is to prioritize winning first. I'm the kind of person that if I were a professional athlete, and I certainly was never good enough to be one, but if I were a professional athlete and I was around guys that were winning championships, would I take the money if it were available to me? Absolutely, like anybody else. But I'd have a hard time socializing with a bunch of champions if I never won anything. It would be hard for me. I couldn't be hanging out. I couldn't be with y'all here. Like, you know, we best buddies and, you know, having a ball together and we hang out and we're inseparable and it's 4 of us, but 3 of us got titles and I'm the one that does it. But I'm hanging out with you all the time. Nah, you'd be looking for me. You'd be like, yo, Steve, where you at? How come we haven't seen you? Come on, man, let's go out, et cetera, et cetera. It would be very, very sporadic and infrequent that those things would happen to me, because it would sicken me that I did not reach the pinnacle of my profession, but I'm surrounded by folks who have. And I think that when you look at the world of professional sports, because we preach so much about how much of a team game it is, I think what you have is a situation where it's gotten to a point where it's all right for people not to win. If I gave my best, well, you know what? I can't control the outcome. I got teammates. It's not just on me. It's on everybody else. But that's not the way it used to be, because you can allude to Hall of Famers. I know them. I know Isaiah Thomas. I know Julius Erving. I know Michael Jordan. I know all of these people. And so I know what it was like for them when they were in pursuit of a title and hadn't captured it yet, and how much it sickened them to their core that they didn't win. And it was everything to them. And when you hear those kind of stories, and then you see guys now, and it's like, again, there's no shortage of effort. They put forth the effort. They work very hard. But those feelings, like when they lose, all right, you know, I got my vacation planned to Spain and Italy and the islands, and, you know, the sun will shine tomorrow. The world is going to be all right. I'm not from that generation. I'm from that generation where I know guys that, I know people whose marriages have fallen apart because they were so fixated on winning. Now, I'm not advocating that, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that I appreciate knowing that about them when I watched them perform, because I knew that it meant more to them than it did to me, and I like that.
Thank you so much. So, over the years, obviously, there have been so many new forms of media, and one of the biggest things now are there's so many critics in so many different fields. How would you say that being a sports critic kind of compares to being a music critic or a movie critic?
Well, movie critic is, I don't know much about that. You're watching the movies and you're seeing somebody's work. Not to say that that's not it in sports, but if I had to highlight a difference, it's the accessibility. See, I can understand why an athlete would get more irritated with the media than a movie critic. A movie critic, well, when do you see actors and actresses? You usually see them when a movie's about to come out. And so as a result, they go on the circuit and they do their interviews and they're fine. Well, what if you're LeBron James? 82 nights a year, you're exposed to the media after games.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't include off days. And you've got to answer questions day after day after day. I don't care who you are, you get tired of them. You get tired of them. You know, listen, there's a lot of men out here who are married, who love their wives dearly, and their wives love them back. And both of them are happy to be away from each other from time to time. So if they feel that way about each other's loved ones, could you imagine how they feel about the media? Or somebody whose job it is to critique and analyze and dissect everything that they do pertaining to their line of work. It would be irritating. It would irritate me. So I don't blame an athlete at all for being irritated at times and, you know, to get tired of the same questions and all of that stuff. I understand that. That's perfectly within their right to feel that way. And I think it's different in that regard because we live in a society where the athletes are more exposed to critiques and criticism than anybody else in any field, even politicians. You don't have access to politicians every day. They get to go up on Capitol Hill or wherever it is that they go, and you got to make an appointment to see them and all of this other stuff. No, the athletes come to the arena, and you're there waiting for them. And they don't get to sit up there every day and say, I'm not talking to you. It's actually in their contract. They're obligated to communicate. If they don't, they could get fined. No other business has that. So I think that, you know, there's a level of empathy and understanding that athletes deserve in terms of what they have to deal with in that regard.
All right, well, thank you so much. Once again, my name is Brian, and you guys are listening to WTSR. We'd like to remind you to open your mind.